The BKA, the German Federal Police in Wiesbaden. For 6 years, the agency is run by a man integral to its inception, Paul Dickopf. A top civil servant with a seemingly clean record, he claims he opposed the Nazis. Until 1971, during Willy Brandt's time as Chancellor, he is the top criminologist in West Germany.
Wer ihn kritisierte oder gar gefährlich werden konnte, dem hat er das nie vergessen. Er war sehr nachtragend und hat solche Leute auch vernichtet.
Dickopf doesn't only forge a career for himself in West Germany. In 1968, he becomes head of Interpol. It's now his job to fight crime on an international scale.
Minister Genscher hat bei der Verabschiedung von Dickopf gesagt, dass er ein Beispiel für die Polizei in ganz Deutschland sei.
After Dickopf's death in 1973, staff researching files to compile his obituary make an astonishing find. They turn up documents outing Dickopf as a staunch Nazi. His lifelong lie finally comes to light. Dickopf was not only a member of the SS and a Nazi spy. Shortly before the end of the war, he switched sides to start working as an agent for the Americans. Numerous CIA documents give an insight into the work of Caravel, which was Dickopf's CIA codename. The highest-ranking member of the German police sold confidential information from the Bonn government. Chancellor Willy Brandt and his Ostpolitik was of particular interest to the Americans, and Dickopf readily provided the information. As did many other Nazis during the Cold War. They became willing helpers, spies, because American intelligence services used their pasts to blackmail them.
Die Amerikaner hat sehr selten gestört, dass irgendwelche Leute, die sie brauchten, eine Nähe zu irgendwelchen Massenmördern oder Extremisten oder Terroristen hatten. Es kam immer nur auf die Sache an.
American intelligence services faced a new enemy, communism. The US enlisted former Nazis as spies. There was no attempt to punish them for their war crimes.
As the Cold War grew hot, these Nazi collaborators became pawns of Western intelligence services for a variety of both psychological warfare type missions, covert operations, and this type of thing.
Only now are Secret Service files from the Cold War accessible, and they contain documents about Nazis who became willing CIA spies. Another case that has recently surfaced is that of Eugen Steimler, a die-hard Nazi who led firing squads in the Soviet Union. Steimler was thought to be among those killed when a Lufthansa plane crashed near Nuremberg on the 20th of April 1945. Eyewitnesses saw the burning plane in the sky, and the crash site is still visible in the Piesenkorfen forest today. At the time, locals collected up everything they found around the wreckage. One item recovered was a briefcase containing documents and IDs. Among them was one belonging to Steimler. The briefcase was taken to the local Nazi commander's office. A few days later, US troops marched into the area, and the briefcase was seized by members of the Army's Secret Service. The Americans were looking for Nazis they could use for their own purposes, and every personal detail helped them in their search. They suspected Steimler was still alive. CIA documents listing the contents of the briefcase make it possible to reconstruct what really happened. The Lufthansa plane takes off from Tempelhof on April the 20th, 1945, while the battle for Berlin is raging. Those on board know it's only a matter of time before the Russians and the Western Allies take power. There are more than 20 passengers on the Condor, among them a number of men in leather overcoats. The captain takes off under the cover of darkness. The planned destination is Spain, with a fuel stop in Munich. But the weather is bad.
Ich kann mich noch gut erinnern, als mein Vater in der Früh beim Frühstück sagte, da ist der Flieger so nieder drüber geflogen und gerumpelt hat der.
Meine Freundin wohnt hier ganz in der Nähe und am Abend flog ein brennendes Flugzeug über ihr Hausdach und die Mutter hat voller Panik die beiden Kinder gepackt und hat sich mit ihnen zu Boden geworfen, weil sie sagte, der Vater ist im Krieg gestorben, jetzt sterben wir alle drei zusammen.
The plane crashes in a forest with no survivors. Were there high-ranking Nazis on board the Condor trying to get to Spain? American intelligence flies the briefcase and the documents to the US. The agents in Washington know the end of the war will herald a new chapter in the confrontation of the superpowers. And in order to secure an advantage, they will recruit former top Nazis. They strike it lucky. One man in the files is of particular interest to the Americans, SS Standartenführer Steimler. Their research tells them he was responsible for mass murders in Russia. The agents suspect he is still alive, as a number of witnesses report having seen him after the crash. Locals near the crash site are questioned again. As a war criminal, Steimler is valuable to the Americans.
It was impossible to systematically recruit intelligence agents without systematically recruiting war criminals. Those things went together.
They launch a manhunt across Germany for Eugen Steimler, who fled to his home near the Black Forest. The net closes, and in autumn 1945, the former SS intelligence officer turns himself in for interrogation. He knows his only chance is to tell the truth.
Ein Überläufer, der etwas zu verbergen hat, zum Beispiel Mordtaten, ist erpressbar und ist dadurch ein gefügiges Werkzeug in der Hand seiner neuen Chefs.
His testimony and the documents from the briefcase helped the Americans to uncover an entire network of German spies in Spain. It consists of dozens of ex-Nazis who, following the collapse of the Third Reich, are already working on their next crazy idea, the Fourth Reich, which translates to worldwide fascism. The Americans observe them and recruit the Spanish players to work on their behalf. Following his interrogation, Steimler is sentenced to death by hanging, but is then surprisingly pardoned. Did the Americans enlist him and influence the verdict? There is no proof, as important files are missing from the US interrogation center in Oberursel.
Nazis like Dick Kopf and Steimler become agents, but the US intelligence services want more than just spies. They want Nazi treasures.
Right up until the war was over, the Allies believed the Nazis had an Alpine redoubt. Even now, the myth of missing Nazi gold still lures treasure hunters to the area. But do these treasures really exist? Towards the end of the war, German industry made plans to secure its capital in the event of defeat.
This was very dangerous to have such discussions. But nevertheless, the alternative of losing everything when Hitler was finally died, however that exactly happened, was even more dangerous. So they went ahead with this. And they started to draw up plans, some of which still exist, on how they would attempt to reconstitute Germany after Hitler left.
These activities were no secret to the Allied intelligence services. They launched a large-scale international surveillance operation, codenamed Safe Haven.
Safe Haven was the name of a U.S. government program whose task it was to track and seize assets that the Nazis had seized, had looted from Europe, and were attempting to distribute around the world in order to, for use after 1945.
The Americans knew such plans had been hatched by industry, and even in the Reich Chancellery. They were also aware of a network of foreign companies set up to keep funds safe. In Monaco in particular, numerous shell corporations had access to millions. One company was a broadcaster, on whose board sat the then unknown Kurt Georg Kiesinger. He would eventually become Chancellor of West Germany. The fact that he worked for the foreign and propaganda ministries during the Third Reich didn't adversely affect his career. Allied agents submitted detailed reports about financial transfers. Sometimes they were even able to smuggle people into meetings. This espionage operation was led by Alan Dulles, then a US agent in Switzerland, who later rose to be head of the CIA. He knew how to use his knowledge of Nazis' financial doings to benefit his career in Washington. When a bomb attack destroys the Berlin Reichsbank in March 1945, gold and currency reserves are no longer secure. It's time to put the plan into action. Quickly and thoroughly, everything is meticulously noted and checked as 360 tons of gold and 300 tons of silver and banknotes are loaded up and taken away. Documents relating to the Reichsbank gold remain undiscovered in the German central bank for more than 60 years, when Karl Bernd Esser finally finds them.
Alles Gold dieser Reichsbank-Zweigstellen, das da war, wurde alles zentral nach Merkers verlagert oder in gewisse Depots in Bayern.
Now the Americans see their chance. Thanks to Operation Safe Haven, they know exactly where the gold is stored. They arrive in the Soviet occupation zone, at the Merkers salt mine in the eastern state of Thuringia, before the Soviets themselves. They declare the Reichsbank gold to be Nazi loot and take it with them. They also seize other treasures they find there, including Italian gold reserves and gold from the National Bank for Bohemia and Moravia. Were the hiding places in the Alps also cleared out long ago?
Sie können in Bayern mit Sicherheit kein Gold finden. Es gibt da einen Abrechnungsbeleg, was die Reichsbank an Gold versteckt hat in verschiedenen Depots. Diese Depots wurden alle gefunden, hauptsächlich von den Amerikanern. Die fuhren sogar in die sowjetische Zone rüber und haben dort in Merkas, das liegt ja eigentlich in der Ostzone, haben sie dort das Hauptdepot ganz schnell geräumt.
Karl Bernd Esser says it was an act of theft because it essentially means the Germans twice repaid their Marshall Plan loan, once with the Reichsbank gold and once in Deutschmarks.
Also der Marshallplan ist eigentlich eine gelungene Erfindung von den Amerikanern, wie man Freunde reinlegen kann, ohne dass man es merkt. Also wenn ich Ihnen jetzt 1.000 Euro nehme und Sie merken es nicht, und ich sage dann zu Ihnen, Sie kriegen 1.000 Euro Kredit von mir und dann kriege ich auch noch ein bisschen Zinsen und Sie freuen sich, das ist aber netter, das ist ein netter Zug. Ne? Aber in Wirklichkeit habe ich Ihnen ja vorher die 1.000 Euro geklaut. Nur Sie haben es gar nicht gemerkt.
The US intelligence services don't only use their knowledge and their treasures in Germany, but also recruit Italian fascists during the Cold War. The idea is that they will fight communism on America's behalf.
Starting in the 1960s, a series of attacks in Italy claim hundreds of lives. The violence is initially blamed on left-wingers, but it's now known to have been the work of right-wing radicals. Stefano Della Chiaia is head of the New Right Party. He is repeatedly accused of terrorist activity, but is never convicted.
La nostra posizione politica era molto semplice e molto chiara. Noi provenivamo da un'esperienza storica che rispettavamo, che era quella del fascismo, e tentavamo di proiettare i valori fondamentali che il fascismo aveva espresso durante il suo governo nella realtà che ci ricordava, la realtà con la quale ci confrontavamo.
In 1970, the fascist revolutionaries and their backers want to stage a coup in Italy and stamp out the left-wing parties. They discussed their plans with the CIA.
Sappiamo che la CIA era stata contattata, che era informata della cosa.
On December the 7th, Della Chiaia's supporters, the far-right Avanguardia Nazionale and parts of the military, set their plan in motion. Their first targets are the state broadcaster and government buildings. The revolutionaries around Stefano Della Chiaia believe they are pulling the strings. But the attempted coup is actually being driven from elsewhere. Although Della Chiaia still proudly claims responsibility.
Io ne sono evidentemente corresponsabile politico e morale, anche se non ero fisicamente sul territorio italiano. Il comandante aveva preparato un meccanismo perfetto. Si trattava praticamente, che io lo descrivo nel libro, si trattava che dal Ministero della Difesa doveva partire un ordine che era già praticamente stilato ed era in cassaforte per ordinare a tutte le guarnigioni militari di uscire e occupare i posti nevralgici del paese.
The fight against the left wing has a long history in Italy, and the US intelligence services have been involved from the very beginning. Its influence begins with the invasion of Sicily, when Allied soldiers fight and beat the Axis powers. But some Italian forces don't give up and continue to fight on the side of the Germans until 1945. One unit in particular is feared, the Decima Flotilla Mass, the world's first frogman commando. The Allies both fear and admire their daring operations. The leader of the unit is Valerio Borghese, the Black Prince.
La decima Mass del principe Borghese era probabilmente l'unità più addestrata e motivata di tutta la Repubblica Sociale.
It takes another 2 years before World War II is won in Italy. And when the Americans finally march into Rome, they are welcomed as liberators. even by the Pope, who shares the US fear of a shift to the left in Italy.
We see the very own home.
Because the communists are gaining in popularity.
L'obiettivo degli americani è sempre stato di mantenere i comunisti fuori dal governo o fuori dalle leve del potere, di impedirgli di entrare anche soltanto come un appoggio esterno.
CIA agent James Jesus Angleton starts preparing a coup in the event that the communists win the Italian elections.
Angleton aveva un buon rapporto, oltre che avere un ottimo rapporto, relazioni in Italia, sapeva l'italiano per esempio, anche con il Vaticano, che all'epoca, ricordo, e forse anche adesso, aveva il servizio segreto più efficiente del mondo. Angleton con Borghese diventa quindi anche molto amico, e Borghese esce dal movimento sociale e crea il Fronte Nazionale come un coordinamento di varie forze di destra, sempre in funzione di evitare una deriva a sinistra dell'Italia che man mano nel tempo aumenta.
The communists are the arch enemies of Borghese, who almost killed him at the end of the war. To act against the communists, the CIA enlists Borghese.
Angleton succeeded in convincing the rest of the U.S. government that the elections of 1947-1948 in Italy would lead to a communist government in Italy, and so that therefore the Americans should sink millions of dollars into disrupting these elections and disrupting particularly the left-wing candidates in these elections.
Operation Safe Haven pays off. The Americans use seized Nazi loot to finance Angleton's activities against Italy's communists. The seized riches will never be returned to the victims or their relatives.
The money was money frequently that had been looted from Europe's Jews. Why? The Exchange Stabilization Fund was set up early during World War II to seize Nazi assets in international trade. It was part of the blockade of Germany.
Angleton sets up a partisan army. This rarely seen footage shows training. Many of the partisans are battle-tested fascists from Borghese's frogmen. Gladio, as the unit is called, is under the exclusive command of the CIA.
In the event that Italy democratically voted to become socialist, there would be stay-behind networks, underground elements that were armed and paid and ideologically prepared to attempt to overturn that democratically elected government.
But Gladio is called off because the communists lose the first post-war elections. The mood is tense, as the Soviets are forced to accept that Italy now belongs to the US sphere of control. And any hopes of a third way are dashed by Yalta.
Il significato di Yalta è che gli accordi presi a Yalta dai vincitori, cioè Russia, Gran Bretagna e USA, per una spartizione delle proprie aree di influenza nel mondo, soprattutto in Europa, è stato un accordo che alla fine è stato osservato fino alla fine dell'Unione Sovietica, cioè fino al crollo del muro.
Yalta puts Italy under US influence. It's clear that in matters relating to their political and strategic interests, the Americans will do what they see fit, and that they will not create space between the blocs for a third power.
In un mondo post-Yalta, tutte le rivolte in Europa sono state comunque lasciate sedare da chi aveva il potere in Ungheria piuttosto che a Berlino, o tutte le rivolte che ci sono state, il terrorismo in Italia, in Germania, alla fine è servito solo a stabilizzare una situazione politica.
As did the 1978 murder of Italian Prime Minister Aldo Moro. he was kidnapped and shot by the Red Brigades. But numerous agents and intelligence services were also involved in the killing. Many Italians believe Moro was murdered because he wanted a third way. Other powers were also involved in the 1970 attempted coup. Borghese and Della Chiaia were just puppets.
Quello che sappiamo di una telefonata fatta a Borghese intorno tra l'una e le 2 di notte che bloccava il golpe. E questa telefonata è di un uomo politico, questo si sa, secondo il lettera testamento di Borghese si è trattato di Bernabei che parlava a nome di Andreotti, e Andreotti in quella situazione era garante degli americani.
The ones really pulling the strings are high-ranking Italians. Right-wing politician Giulio Andreotti, who was later Prime Minister 7 times, and Licio Gelli, head of the P2 Freemasons Lodge and American agent.
Poi in seguito si inventeranno 1000 menzogne. Si parlerà di Gelli, che praticamente aveva dato il contrordine al golpe, si parlerà di Andreotti alle spalle di questo, tacendo 2 cose importanti. Una, che Vitalone, pubblico ministero del processo del golpe Borghese, amico di Andreotti, uomo di Andreotti, aveva chiesto per me e per altri 28 anni di galera. Quindi da un amico come questo evidentemente bisogna guardarsi.
During the attempted coup, the US military flexed its muscles. Shortly beforehand, the 6th US Fleet was allegedly put on a state of alert. Hoping to impress the CIA, Gelli and Andreotti presented themselves to the Americans as influential figures capable of both mobilizing and calling off military coups.
Fascists such as Borghese and Della Chiaia have to go underground, and the US intelligence services choose South America as the most suitable place. There, in their search for power, the fascists join forces with dictators.
È chiaro che anche lì noi cerchiamo di trasportare quello che era il nostro credo, la nostra convinzione, soprattutto per quanto riguarda la lotta per la terza posizione. In America Latina trovavamo un terreno molto più fertile. Del resto molti dei partiti che erano in America Latina nascevano da esperienze fasciste e nazionalsocialiste.
But Chile is different. In 1971, socialist Salvador Allende is elected to power. His Marxist politics make him enemies and many enthusiastic followers.
This was perceived by the United States as a tremendous threat, because if peaceful revolution were to take hold, that would greatly weaken the United States' ideological hold on South America.
Under the instructions of US Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, the CIA becomes active in Chile. The staunch anti-communist is not content to bank on Allende losing the next elections. In September 1973, General Pinochet, supported by Italian fascists, stages a military coup. The Americans leave them to it. The two sides, like Pinochet, want to wipe out communism.
Avevamo contatti con camerati cileni già prima del golpe del Cile. Nel 1974 col comandante Borghese mi recai a Santiago del Cile e ci incontrammo con il presidente Pinochet, e lì iniziò evidentemente un rapporto molto più diretto e più stretto, per cui quando noi arrivammo praticamente in Cile fummo accolti dall'allora presidente Pinochet.
In 1975, the fascists gather in Madrid to attend the funeral of a mutual and like-minded friend, Spanish dictator Francisco Franco. It's here that the cooperation between Italian fascists and the Chilean intelligence service, DINA, is sealed. The ringleader is none other than Stefano Della Chiaia. But again, his involvement in the ensuing crimes is never proven. The first meeting of collaborators, but it's not the last.
Pinochet himself meets with these terrorists who have just pulled off this assassination. And Manuel Contreras is there, and everybody is having a kind of right-wing love fest. They then, Stefano de la Chiaie, are given permission, apparently at that meeting, that they can set up headquarters in Chile. So the Italians then began to collaborate with Dina.
There follows a series of murders. Among the targets is Allende's former foreign minister Orlando Letelier in Washington. But terrorism on home turf is too much for the US, which reins Pinochet in.
They talk about the weakness of the United States in its ability to defeat the communist menace, and the desire of the military governments in Latin America to take the leadership internationally to defeat the communist movement worldwide. The scope of this is mind-blowing. They actually referred to it as World War III.
Pinochet's junta prepares for this war.
Dazu gehörte der Wunsch, Atomwaffen zu besitzen. Dazu gehörte die Produktion biologischer Waffen. Und es sind auch Gefangene in Chile damit probeweise umgebracht worden. Und die Produktion von Giftgasen, Sarin und Senfgas.
The research laboratory for inhuman experiments is located at Colonia Dignidad. The hamlet goes from strange to sinister.
Nach dem Militärputsch 1973 wurde die Colonia Dignidad zum Folterlager, zum Ausbildungslager des Geheimdienstes DINA mit einer Folterschule, zum Waffenschmuggelzentrum, zum Zentrum alternativer Waffenproduktion und zu einem Kommunikationszentrum des Geheimdienstes DINA zum Ausland.
This part of Colonia Dignidad is sealed off with a death strip. The underground torture chambers are well hidden, so that from the outside it looks like a farm. Anyone who wants to be fooled could be.
Sono rimasto impressionato dalla struttura di questo, tanto che mi aveva in un certo modo in seguito io sono un sognatore evidentemente e avevo sognato di creare un centro di questo tipo per i miei camerati che avessero motivo di staccare la spina in un certo momento della loro battaglia, cioè per riposo eccetera. Quindi avevo in mente una cosa del genere.
Far from being just a recuperation center for Nazis, Colonia Dignidad is also used to produce biological and chemical weapons. Chile's intelligence service needs untraceable deadly toxins.
There is a short list of people that have been confirmed to have been murdered using sarin, using gas.
A German doctor is one of those experimenting at Colonia Dignidad.
Der Arzt der Colonia Dignidad, Hartmut Topp, der vor der chilenischen Justiz nach Krefeld geflohen ist, hatte eine Giftküche in diesem Siedlungsgelände, das aus ungefähr 400 Giftstoffen bestand. Darunter Gifte zum Einatmen, Gifte, die getötet haben bei Berührung, Gifte, die getötet haben, wenn man sie mit der Nahrung einnahm. Es war ein wildes Arsenal und niemand weiß ganz genau, wer diesen Vergiftungen schon zum Opfer gefallen ist.
The Cold War Nazis don't only support Pinochet, but other dictators in South America as well. The CIA gives them free rein.
In 1980, the military stages a coup in Bolivia. Known as the cocaine coup, it brings the mafia under General Garcia Meza to power.
desencadenó una escalada terrorista que adquirió...
Pulling the strings in the background is a German, Nazi Colonel Klaus Barbie. A fascist companion waxes lyrical.
L'ho conosciuto quando ero in Bolivia. E un grande personaggio, di grande intelligenza, di grande capacità, di grande rettitudine.
Klaus Barbie had won himself the name the Butcher of Lyon for his brutal treatment of members of the resistance opposing German occupation during World War II. After the war, Barbie was hired by the American intelligence services.
There were different ways that senior SS and SD officers survived the war, but they do share a common pattern. And the pattern is something that I call entrepreneurism or intelligence entrepreneurism, in which they take whatever assets they can lay their hands on and attempt to sell these or to encourage intelligence services to invest in them.
Klaus Barbie is a valuable agent for the Americans. He uses his knowledge of communists and the resistance to buy his own freedom.
Die Amerikaner haben eigentlich alles dran gesetzt, dass die Resistance-Leute nicht nach dem Krieg zur Macht kommen konnten. Und Barbie war für sie wichtig, weil er das Kollaborationsnetz, das mit den Deutschen in der besetzten Zone zusammengearbeitet hat und auch in Vichy, was er das in der Hand hatte. Das konnte er den Amerikanern überbringen. Insofern war das außerordentlich wertvoll. Er konnte auch die Erpressbarkeit der ganzen französischen politischen Szene natürlich in erheblichem Umfang durchschauen.
The Americans initially hide the war criminals in Germany and then in South America.
They understood particularly the bloody politics of certain types of intelligence. They understood colonial war. They had a mentality that was well suited for colonial war. It's because they believed themselves to be, when all was said and done, uber, superior, and thus were willing to take the lives of a great many people that they considered to be inferior for racial or ethnic reasons.
Barbie ultimately becomes an intelligence service advisor in South America. In the 70s, Operation Condor begins.
The American Operation Condor was an alliance, if you will, between the intelligence agencies of several South American governments that at that time were run by fascist or extreme right-wing parties with well-documented histories of disappearances, abuse, murder of prisoners, and so forth. And that those regimes found Klaus Barbie to be a very compatible agent for their operations.
A total of 50,000 people from the alliance nations are murdered. Once again, the CIA is involved.
I call it the red light, green light phenomenon. The United States was publicly defending human rights and privately telling these regimes that what they were doing was okay. Until they defeated the left, they should go ahead and do it.
Secretary of State Henry Kissinger is seen as a driving force behind the CIA policy. France, Chile and Argentina summon him to answer questions about human rights violations. In 2007, Uruguay requests his extradition. It gradually becomes clear Kissinger is covering for Operation Condor, even for the death squads. Among them is a well-known fascist, Stefano Della Chiaia in Bolivia, leading a troop of mercenaries.
Diese Verlobten des Todes, wie sie hießen, haben diese Kokainmafia, die in Bolivien geputscht hat, unterstützt und nachher auch ihren Vorteil davon gehabt. Und die sind durch viele Länder Lateinamerikas gezogen und haben überall da Konterrevolution gemacht, Leute ermordet, gefoltert und ihren Reibach dabei gemacht.
The grooms of death are financed by the cocaine trade, a sector entwined with secret services worldwide. The drugs trade is an ideal source of money. Everything is top secret, and those involved can be blackmailed.
Der Krieg gegen die Drogen ist im Grunde genommen eine Täuschungsoperation gegenüber der Öffentlichkeit. Der eigentliche Drogenhandel, der erfolgreich ist, privilegiert. Das ist natürlich die Leute, die privilegiert werden von einem Geheimdienst, zu sagen, das sind unsere Männer, denen darf nicht das Handwerk gelegt werden, dass die im Grunde genommen völlig ohne jede Gefahr Salatköpfe bauen können und die für einen irrsinnigen Preis letztlich in Amerika, in Europa, wo auch immer verkaufen können. Also eine unglaubliche Gewinnspanne. Und entlang dieser Gewinnspanne wird abgeschöpft das, was für die Geheimdienste notwendig ist und womit alle möglichen Operationen bezahlt werden.
Klaus Barbie perfected the cocaine trade in Bolivia, among other things.
Barbie hat dort die Unterdrückung systematisiert. Also einfach das System der Schläge, der Brutalität abgeschafft, die systematische Folter eingeführt und das organisierte Gefängniswesen eingeführt. Das ist ihm am Schluss zum Verhängnis geworden, denn dadurch wurde man auf ihn aufmerksam, dann wurde er ausgeliefert.
In Lyon in May 1987, 4 years after his extradition, Klaus Barbie was sentenced to lifelong imprisonment. He died in prison in 1991.
Very few Nazis were ever sentenced. Paul Dickkopf, the long-serving president of the BKA, enjoyed the trust of leading politicians until his death.
Although a former SS man and Nazi spy, Dickkopf was hired by the Americans even before the end of the war.
Er hat natürlich irgendwann gesehen, dass es in Deutschland zu Ende geht. Und er hat dann sein Fähnchen in den Wind gehängt und hat ihm gesagt, ab sofort mit den anderen.
His friend François Genoux, another Nazi agent, helps him. They know each other from Switzerland, where they even lived together.
Genoux war ein großer Banker, gleichzeitig ein großer Anhänger des Nationalsozialismus und Hitler. Und vermutlich war er derjenige, der in großem Umfang Nazi- und SS-Vermögen über die Wende von 1945 hinaus gerettet hat.
Genoux published Goebbels' diaries and made a lot of money as a result. He uses the proceeds to finance the defense for Adolf Eichmann and Klaus Barbie. He's friends with the terrorists Carlos and Wadi Haddad, who was also a KGB agent and is responsible for numerous brutal attacks. But Dickkopf's connections don't damage his career. On the contrary, the CIA and its head Dulles advance his career.
Zunächst einmal hat ja ganz sicher auch diese Verbindung zu dem amerikanischen Geheimdienst eine Rolle gespielt, dass er trotz eines SS-Dienstgrades eingestellt wurde, zunächst im Bundesinnenministerium, dann eben Abteilungsleiter im BKA geworden ist. Und ich denke, dass diese Förderung ja auch schon, das ist aber jetzt eine Interpretation von mir, auch schon ein Ziel hatte seitens des Geheimdienstes CIA, dass man ihn auch in eine solche Funktion lancieren wollte.
Dickkopf passed on information about German politics, especially concerning Willy Brandt. In confidential meetings, the BKA president was party to top-secret intelligence regarding Brandt's Ostpolitik. It was information from a government whose policy of détente was viewed with skepticism in the US. How much did Paul Dickkopf really know?
Er hat auch teilgenommen an Besprechungen im Ministerium und auf der Ebene der Politik. Und was er da alles verraten hat, was auch die Souveränität der Bundesrepublik wesentlich beeinträchtigt, das kann man nicht beantworten.
Dickkopf is a window into the highest level security and intelligence issues as viewed by the German government of that period. This is high-level, elite insights into the security apparatus of a different country.
In CIA files, Dickopf is described as a unilateral agent, as working exclusively for one side. Was he simply a traitor?
Habe ich ein Problem mit diesem Wort Verräter bei Dickopf, weil für Dickopf war das der normale Alltag. Er war den einen verpflichtet und er war den anderen verpflichtet. Es war sicherlich auch eine gewisse Dankbarkeit gegenüber den Amerikanern.
How badly did Dickopf damage Germany? In 1972, his friend Genoux helps to hijack a Lufthansa jet. The action generates 15 million marks in ransom for Palestinian coffers, money that will be used for further terrorist activity. In 1972, Genoux also finances the Munich massacre of the Israeli Olympic team. The sporting event, which is supposed to be Germany's big prestigious moment, becomes one of the country's biggest ever catastrophes. When 11 Israeli athletes are murdered as the world looks on.
Genoux wiederum hängt ganz eng mit den Nahost-Terrorkreisen zusammen, die wiederum aber mit dem Mossad zusammenarbeiten. Also das ist eine ganz, ganz merkwürdige Struktur.
As head of Interpol, Dickopf is supposed to fight such terrorists financed by his friend Genoux. During his time in office, there's a rise in the number of attacks and hijackings. But Dickopf says Interpol is powerless to stop them.
Sie wissen, dass wir die Sperre des Artikel 3 in unseren Statuten haben, die uns das direkte Eingreifen von der Organisation her nicht erlaubt. Aber gerade das sollte bewirken, dass die Länder untereinander viel stärker ihre Nachrichten austauschen.
Das bedeutet doch, nicht unbedingt, wenn Interpol nicht eingreifen kann, dass nicht Länder bilateral sehr wohl etwas tun können.
Bilateral und multilateral. Sie können alles tun, nur nicht den Weg der Interpol nehmen.
In derselben Zeit, wo in einem Jahr 15 Flugzeuge entführt worden sind, später sind sogar, ich glaube, 30 oder noch mehr Flugzeuge pro Jahr entführt worden, das war mal so eine Technik. In derselben Zeit entscheidet sich die westliche Staatenwelt, dass die Aufklärung von Terror nicht zur Aufgabe von Interpol gehört. Das ist ja auch ungeheuerlich. Also da sitzt ein Mann, Dickopf, in Verbindung mit Genoux, den er auch dauernd trifft. Genoux finanziert die Leute, die Flugzeug entführen. Und Interpol erklärt gleichzeitig, es ist nicht unsere Aufgabe.
Did the CIA know about Dickopf's contacts to Genoux? Documents prove that they did. Dickopf himself told the CIA he had known him since the Second World War. But the open files in Washington don't seem to contain all the information the CIA gleaned from Dickopf and other Nazis.
The CIA had a conscious, deliberate campaign that was based in their general counsel's office to obstruct the release of these records to the maximum extent possible. And most particularly to obstruct the release of records that dealt with relationships between informants and agents and the CIA, which was the exact point of this, okay?
Christopher Simpson was a member of the commission that negotiated with the CIA over the release of the Nazi files. His experiences are sobering.
And one of the most important categories that fits into that description is what's called foreign government information. And that's information in which they have obtained either legally or illegally from a separate government about that government's affairs. This is why you'll see this in the Skorzeny file, you'll see it in the Dickopf file, you'll see it in the Klaus-Barbie file, that to this day, most people aren't familiar with this reality, but there are nevertheless continue to be withheld records in those files.
This policy prevents historians and journalists from getting to the bottom of important espionage operations.
CIA ist ein Weltdienst mit einem ungeheuren Etat, mit unglaublichen Möglichkeiten, gerade weil sie auch den Drogenhandel als Finanzierung mit einbeziehen. Und der spielt auf der Klaviatur aller möglichen Länder. In allen europäischen Ländern spielt das eine Rolle. Einflussnahme auf die Politik, Einflussnahme auf die Feindbildlage, Einflussnahme auf die Einschätzung der Bevölkerung, psychologische Kriegführung. All das spielt eine Rolle. Und wenn ich da jemanden zur Verfügung habe, dann kann ich sozusagen eine Demokratie steuern, wie die italienische Demokratie gesteuert worden ist und wie möglicherweise auch bei uns Einfluss genommen worden ist auf bestimmte politische Prozesse.
Ein Geheimdienst ist kein Gesangsverein.
Many intelligence service activities from the Cold War era have still not been opened to public scrutiny. This includes the operations which turned war criminals and fascists into collaborators.